and welcome to another episode of the Rollwise Show podcast.
Sure.
Whatever we are these days, I
Show
don't really
works.
know. We just like talking online. So, another episode of us talking about stuff. And so today we are going to be talking about some stuff related to games and party composition and everything like that. Brent and I were kind of talking just offline and everything, and we had actually been playing so many non D&D games that Brent and I wanted to kind of talk about a little bit about game balance, how certain games promote certain types of play, how that can really influence how the players select characters, and I believe it boils down to, in some games, who's going to play the healer, right, Brent?
Right. Yeah. And I hate that conversation.
So I mean, so let's have a conversation about game balance and party composition and why it kind of is not fun to have to play a class in order to balance out your game. So, Brent, I'm going to turn it over to you. So, since you have the main thesis of this very high level talk,
You mean I have the most passionate opinion about this?
well, you do. I mean, it's actually a very interesting conversation because there's many times when I was growing up that there would be that really uncomfortable, like, well, I want to be a fighter. Who's going to be the healer? Like,
Right.
So it kind of turned this weird thing, and I don't know if it's like, I don't know, because it was happening before I was playing video games. That happened.
Right. It happened before. It was before the age of the MMO. So
Mhm.
that's an even weirder occurrence that people were like, "Well, we need a healer in this party."
Yeah.
And I think, I don't know. I think what makes it really, what I really don't like about it is that suggestion that there is a perfect party that you have to have to
Mhm.
play games. And there's a couple different reasons. One, I don't know, I was never that popular of a kid, so like me having 4 friends who all want to get together and play D&D wasn't always easy. Like
Mhm.
I could get 2 friends, which you can't have a perfect party with 2 friends.
Mhm.
Um, unless one of them, I guess if every party of my 2 friends was a fighter and a healer, the fighter and healer buddy cop movie, like maybe that would work. I don't know. That sounds awful boring though.
Mhm.
But like, and that's the thing is like, I don't like games that stress that sort of party composition because it really limits what you're going to do with the
Mhm.
players. And also, the other thing that kind of happens sometimes is if someone doesn't pick and they're the type of party that likes to min max or really make sure that they have that sort of
Mhm.
complete party, like one person's going to get the shaft and have to play a character that they don't want. They're going
Sure.
to have to play some sort of healer if the party really pushes it.
So
Or
a
and that
democratic, it almost seems like democratic, but it really isn't, because everyone just kind of gangs up on you and peer pressures you into a
right, it's
class you
like,
don't
well,
like.
everybody else is picked. And you're like, oh, I guess I have to play a healer. And that's happened to me before, actually, in a
Oh
game.
yeah.
It's happened to me. But and like that's the thing. And then like you're playing a class you may not like, you know,
Mhm.
or you say, no, I'm not playing a healer, and you play whatever class you want anyways. And then there can be this like sort of like passive aggressive feels bad.
Mhm.
And I know people are gonna say, like, don't play with people like that, but like sure, but sometimes even people your best friends are like that when you and just don't really like they don't intentionally do that, but they kind of do it. It's like, oh well, the game isn't as fun if we're not, a whole party. The game isn't as fun if we don't have the rogue who can pick locks, and then the healer who can make sure the fighter doesn't die right away. And
So you bring up an interesting question, because like lately we've been playing a lot of games that I think are intentionally unbalanced in terms of party composition. They basically say play whatever the fuck you want, and
Mhm.
then the game, you just react to the game. And I think that in like more narrative style games like Powered by the Apocalypse and everything like that, there are obviously classes that attract certain types of play, and they are fun in that situationally they're more powerful than other characters because that's just how the game is designed. But as a narrative game, it's kind of encouraged to have different, you
Right.
know.
And like games like Powered by the Apocalypse is like, oh, you can't all be the same thing. Like
Mhm.
you can only be you can't be the same thing, which enforces a similar idea of
Mhm.
party variability, but it does it in a way that your character still feels special. It's like you still have
Mhm.
a choice of those characters because there is no really a healer. But
Yeah.
like in those like, and I'm gonna say it's usually D20 style games based on
Sure.
the classic D&D archetype where it encourages that. You know, you look. I always, one of the things that I always do now is I pick up a game and I read the beginning and I look for that text that says we suggest that you have a balanced party of, and then I close the book and I put it back on the shelf because it's not one that I want.
Any
Because
recent examples of when you picked up a book like that? Because I
actually, the Genesis suggests that,
oh, really?
which is one thing that turned me off to it for actually trying to run it. Is it did say that you need like kind of a complete party, and I was
Mhm.
like, one, it seemed weird for the style of game that it is that it would say that, and two, it just doesn't. I encourage I encourage parties to play all bards or something wacky like that because it's fun when stuff like that happens.
It's true,
And
and we have experienced an all bard party, and the weird thing about all well, nearly all bard parties,
there you go.
somebody said, "F you guys," and obviously we weren't like, "Let's play an all bard party," and then somebody was just like, they were just like, "Well, we don't really care. We just happen to have a bunch of people that decided to play bard."
No, what happened was is
Whoa, whoa, whoa!
I said I'm gonna play I'm gonna play off brand and I'm gonna play a bard, and then two other people went, oh, I'm gonna play a bard too, and then
See,
the other person went, I'm playing a monk.
they're like a bard. But no, but I think it's interesting because I'm actually curious, like, because like in my own player evolution and everything like that, I always feel like that conversation about the like perfect party composition and everything was always encouraged in my earlier role playing days rather than my later role playing days. And the reason I say it was my earlier days is because back when, like, my earlier days, D&D was like you go into a dungeon, you
Mhm.
fight a bunch of stuff. And I mean, having a balanced party allowed you to have, I mean, you could just be more, you could more aggressively attack the dungeon because if you had a healer, they could heal you or
Right,
support you or, or buff, debuff. I'm not, don't want to use MMO type terms, but it's just, that's the role that they played. So
right,
you didn't have to look around every corner. Like, you were like, oh my gosh, is a larger than small centipede going to come out and poison me and kill me because I looked at it funny, something like that.
right. It's more well, and this is one of those things that we've talked about a little bit on the show. Is I think as you get older, the gaming part, like it's still a game, but like the role playing part of playing the character becomes your focus and not like
Mhm,
playing the gamist part where when you're
mhm,
younger, kind of playing the game, like getting loot, being good at combat and stuff like that is really your focus. And that's where that kind of build thing matters. Like it comes down to, well, what's my character's build? What's our
mhm,
party's build? What are our capabilities? What resources do we have? Whereas later it's like, oh, I want to play a fighter who is, gets drunk all the time and then stumbles through the dungeon or whatever. Like
mhm,
you're more thinking about how the character is than their abilities. And I,
mhm,
I think that's and that's another reason why I don't like it. That perfect party ideal is because you're really limiting some of the players to just being mechanics or combat characters. I think that's kind of the philosophy that it follows. And I'm glad a lot of games have gotten further away from that.
yeah. Well, that's fair. And I mean, I think that, there are probably a lot of people that haven't, that like, that's their style of game. And that's the way that they like to play D&D is they like
Mhm,
to have that kind of optimized party play style and everything like that. Not everybody does. And I think that, as we've played different games, we found it very freeing to not have to worry about the box that party composition really puts
mhm.
you in. Now, in terms of like your own experience, have you ever had a situation where you've encouraged, you know, basically the balanced party composition, and how did that go for you?
Nope, I've never done that.
No.
Not even when I was younger. Really, did I encourage that? I always encourage people because the story means more to me. I've always encouraged
Hmm.
games. I've always encouraged players to play what they want, even if it seems off brand. And one of the things that or not off brand, even if it seems like it might not be optimal.
Hmm.
And optimization is a term that like D&D comes up when you're playing D&D, which I get
Yeah.
frustrated with. It's like choose interesting options. Don't always choose the most overpowered option,
Hmm.
in my opinion. But there's ways to cover it. Like if you feel like you need a perfect party for a game, it's kind of like when we played the Dark Sun game and we had, I don't remember what everybody was, but I know you were the
Hmm.
Templar and you guys didn't have a fighter at all.
Hmm.
And I gave you a magic item to kind of cover the role of the fighter. You had a little golem manservant that
Hmm.
could help you guys out and tank for you.
Yeah.
And if the game, like, there's ways to cover it if you really, really feel like you have to. But I think
Mhm.
that still hamstrings you a little bit as a GM because you're still trying to make that perfect party in some way. And I feel like that can really impact the stories that you're trying to tell.
Yeah. Well, and it was really it was something that, even going back to when we played 4th edition, we ended up playing 4th edition, and 4th edition just became tactical game simulator. Like,
Mhm.
I mean, you can obviously role play in any system. Like, role playing is just people talking, right?
Right.
You don't need a framework to just talk. Like, that's fine. But like the what happens when the rules meet, where the rubber meets the road, is that all of a sudden this became tactical game simulator. And even after our 4th edition revisiting, we found that having a party of 2 was hard,
Mhm.
because you
In a
guys
combat heavy game.
because in a combat heavy game, you guys didn't have the roles filled, and so while it never felt like you guys were really in as much danger, because I couldn't remember 4th edition, and so I like adjusted it based on their
Mhm.
guidelines, but it never really presented a challenge to you. But at the same time, it's like I felt like the pendulum could have easily swung, where it's
Right.
like, well, I just accidentally killed you both.
That
Whoops.
was the problem with 4th edition, I feel a lot of times. It's like you're good, and as a matter of fact, you're probably overpowered until all of a sudden you're not, and you're like, "Oh
Mhm.
god, we're just dead." Like, we're
Yeah.
not there's no way, like, it's, "Oh, we're winning." And then, well, it happened at in the last little bit when I
Yeah.
stopped hitting with, my Eldritch Blast.
Mhm.
Like, I missed, like, 2 or 3 turns in a row, and, like, all of a sudden, it was like, "Oh, Jeff's dead or close to dead."
Yeah.
And then it's like, "Oh, I can't do anything if he's dead." Like, and it started to get really, like, it got really hairy, and then I think I got lucky again, and
Mhm.
the Eldritch Blast paid off, baby. Um,
Yeah.
but if I remember right, like, we started to lose there at the end. But and the other thing about that kind of, like, tactical idea of the perfect party and those tactical
Mhm.
games is that becomes what you're like, it sets a mindset for the game. Like, the minute
Mhm.
that you say, "Okay, we need a fighter, we need a thief, we need a healer, and we need DPS," if you're using
Mhm.
MMO terms. Like, if you do that, you're setting the idea that this is a game that's going to need all four of these classes, so it's going to be a more tactical game.
Mhm.
Otherwise you wouldn't say that.
Yeah. And I'd be curious to see how far D&D 24 came along. If it's still encouraged, because the funny thing about D&D is that, I mean, even the last few times that we played D&D 5th edition, we were definitely playing, established adventures and everything like that, but we weren't playing with a typical party composition, and didn't feel like the game had gone off the rails or anything like that. It did feel like some of the combat challenges were like a tiny bit more difficult for you, because you guys didn't have a combat heavier character. But in the lower levels, everyone's pretty universally medium, right? You're not like
Right.
super good, but then but it's one of those things where I think that in D&D, I wonder how much that would have changed at like level 10 if you guys got to
Well,
that.
and not just that, it's like, sure, I guess the feeling is sure you can do it without that healer,
Mhm.
but imagine how much better the party would be if we had a healer. Like,
Yeah.
like, that's the thing, is it's always that in those tactical games, it's never, "Oh yeah, we can't play that way." It's usually, "Well, how much better would we be if
Yeah.
we optimized to be good at combat?" Like, we would rest less.
Mhm.
Somebody wouldn't have, been as close to death. We could have done more encounters, and
Mhm.
it comes down to kind of math.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting too, because then the GM has to design around your now super insulated perfect party to be like,
Right.
okay, well, you've got this. How do I challenge this party, with combat? And the only challenge isn't always combat. There are things like traps and everything like that. And I think it's interesting, because I wonder to what degree, if you have party compositions and everything like that, that if you did encourage everyone to play like a rogue, a fighter, a priest and a mage, like in those kind of games, do you think that there's enough spotlighting that happens? So like if you have duplicates of roles, do you think people get as much spotlight to excel in that versus that traditional composition
I, I
where
I do, because I feel like the character becomes the focus, not
Mhm,
not the class. Like,
sure.
what happens in those, and especially in early D&D, was like your character was your class. You didn't have,
Mhm,
you were the fighter. That was your thing. What do you do? You
yeah.
fight. Whereas later, as role playing in general has gotten a little bit better, or more narrative or more story driven,
Mhm.
you can have two fighters because you have you have a fighter who's a different character, like he has a different personality, he responds to things differently than
Mhm.
the other fighter. Not just that, they also have the subclasses and stuff now where you can kind of branch out and be different flavors of fighter. So
Mhm.
I think even D&D has done a good job getting away from that a little bit.
Mhm.
But again, there's always that moment in some D&D games where you're going to go, well, how much better would this be if we had how much easier of that fight would have been if we had a healer.
If we only had a healer.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel you because I do know that when we were doing some of the gaming that I was doing with another group locally, that it felt like everyone was like, you know, parsing out classes, and then somebody was inevitably like, okay, well, who's going to cover the support role to make sure that, you know, we're just not absolutely screwed in a fight.
Right.
And the funny thing is nobody did, and then we got screwed in a fight. So then after my character died, I chose a character that was less likely to get
The shapeshifter
murdered.
druid, right? The shapeshifter druid that didn't heal anybody.
No, I didn't.
No, he was in a wild shape druid. We talked about this before.
Yeah,
He was a circle of the moon druid or whatever the hell
yeah,
it's
yeah. There
called.
was a circle that was a different game. I'm talking about.
Oh,
I
okay.
yeah, I had taken another. I had taken another. More of a priest class, you know, a
Mm.
cleric. So I had actually taken the cleric of whatever life, you know, so I could actually be no, not life. It was light. I took the light one, you know, and so it had healing. So I was like, okay, yeah, now I can heal you very poorly, so don't get too banged up. But at least I can give you a little bit of a bump, you know.
Oh, and then God forbid somebody wants to play a war cleric or something like that. It's like, no, I don't have any healing spells. Uh, and you're like the devil then. Like you were the worst type of player to some people.
Well,
Uh,
there was a in fifth edition there was a oh gosh, my memory on fifth edition is pretty fuzzy now. There was definitely a cleric that was like a cleric of the forge or something, and they were like these heavily armored clerics that went around just beating people up because they were like
well, there's a battle
mini
cleric.
fighters, you know.
Yeah, there's a battle cleric that has they
Mm,
get like a holy smite or something like that as their divine ability instead of healing. And they can like trade their abilities for that instead of the like healing spells for that or something like that. And
mm.
like, yeah, like you're gonna get in trouble. It's like for you MMO people and Mike, it's like playing a shadow cleric in or a shadow
Priest.
priest in WoW at one point. Whereas like you what? You do
Yeah.
damage?
Yeah, well, you're a priest that does, yeah, I mean, nowadays, they're a lot more accepted because they do some pretty cool stuff, but in the beginning, you were like, "Oh, you're not a very good oh, you're not a healer. Oh,
Exactly.
you're you're DPS, I get it now. Yeah, I'm a priest." "Mm,
Oh,
yeah."
you're why are you what are they had that shadow form where they turned like purple and you're like,
Yeah.
you are not what that was advertised on the tin.
Yeah, pretty much. But yeah, and so people have fun and that kind of stuff. And MMOs definitely, when you talk about game balance, that's where it really like people that have played MMOs first probably are more prone to go to a tabletop RPG and
Oh
or
yeah.
even not even MMO, but any kind of like computer game. They're
Yeah.
prone to probably feeling the need to
To have a
balance it.
healing class, yeah.
I mean, not to say that, you know, if their first time in an RPG, they're going to, and you know, stick to that like dogma, but at least I think that that might be a something that they go, oh well, when I played Baldur's Gate 3, this is my party composition, and I found it to be very successful. Where then I go play D&D on pen and paper, an entirely different game than Baldur's Gate 3, and
Right.
and
Yeah.
I'm, you know, and the party is just a bunch of weirdos, and we got killed in the dungeon, and I said we should have had a
Right. Well, yeah, exactly. You guys
yeah,
wanted to play all bards, like,
yeah.
and I think and like it can just be fun doing those
Mm.
just random, character classes. And I'm not saying it's for like I'm not saying you shouldn't do it ever. Like if you enjoy playing a healer, either in an MMO or in an RPG, more power to you. You're an amazing person. Because there's not many of you.
Mhm.
And if people like playing the complete party and they like that more tactical game, definitely, like we always say, play the game that you want.
Yeah,
I'm
I
just
mean
saying,
it's a lot of fun.
I'm just saying you're limiting the amount of stories that you can, tell. Because like having that moment where you have like the two fighters like sitting in the tavern arguing about like who's better at doing the fightery thing, like my sword is better than your axe or stuff, something like that role playing type stuff. Like that's fun stuff that can happen in a
Yeah,
party.
like the Legolas Gimli, banter back and forth as they were like, "I'm not gonna lose to an elf," you know.
Right. Or two wizards debating, like if you get players who are really engaged in their character, two wizards who are debating like which school of magic is better.
Yeah.
Like that sort of in character stuff is interesting.
Mhm,
Even in Earth Dawn, which is a game that doesn't really, because there really isn't a healing class.
mhm.
Like even if you have two character classes of the same, or not classes, two, well, yeah, classes, we'll say classes. Like if you have two warriors who are in the same party, like they will debate which talents and stuff that they each have is better. Like, and that's
Mhm.
cool in-game stuff that happens when you can overlap a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's got some neat applications too, because I do feel like the story that your characters create when they've got characters that they want to play
Mhm.
is usually much more fun than the stories that you were forced to play. Not to say that you can't. I mean, I've definitely been part of games where somebody has reluctantly taken a class that was to fill a niche on the in the party,
Mhm.
and to help out the party, and they had a blast anyways. Like you can. It's not like you can't like play that way. You definitely can.
No, and you can
Um,
definitely play off brand to yourself,
mhm.
but it's better when you do that of your own volition rather than being kind of forced into it.
You've been allocated to priest number 5.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Pretty much.
We all made characters while you weren't here.
Yeah.
You
Well,
missed session 0, so we all made you a cleric.
it's true. It's a
No,
pre-generated character.
it
Yeah.
wasn't pre-generated. We all talked about it and we made what we felt was best for the
Yeah. We,
party.
we pre-generated your character. Yeah. No, it's fine. Well, and it's actually it's an interesting concept, because I'm curious how many like actual plays and stuff like that, they look at party composition as being a component of it. Because I think actual plays do a really good job of telling fun stories and or goofing around. Like, they're there, there's a lot of goofing that happens in some of the OSR actual
Mhm.
plays and stuff like that. Just because they want to have fun. And that's,
Right.
you play these games to have fun.
Mhm.
Um and those that skirmish route might be the reason why there's at least a lingering vestigial
Yeah,
desire to have it. But
probably because that's more gamist, right? Like
mhm,
that's more about
yeah.
playing the actual game. Like you need a healer to keep your minis alive or whatever, like that wargaming
Oh,
thing.
sure.
So
Yeah,
yeah,
well, and
100%.
and we both played Warhammer, the expensive wallet sucking game that it is. And I mean, if you had a balanced army composition, you were at least better able to
Mhm.
respond to the opposing army, but as opposed
Right.
to choosing a really specialist army and hoping for the best that they didn't have your rock beats paper or rock beats
Well,
scissor moment.
and that redundancy of extra hit points that healers cause is beneficial. Like I said,
Mhm.
there's any combat you have where there's people are losing hit points. If somebody can regenerate those hit points, like their
Yeah.
value is quite a bit.
Well, and it's always funny too, because I know that at least in our group, for some reason, nobody ever wants to be a rogue, like or the roguish type.
I've
Um,
played the rogue in almost every time we've done that one of those games.
no, that recently you had, but like because in the Pathfinder you played a rogue, and before that, what was the other rogue? 'Cause
Did I have another rogue? I had a fighter.
Yeah,
I guess
I
there
mean,
was a fighter in
you've
there.
been mostly martial class. I mean, a rogue is a kind of martial class, but like the ability to pick locks and be subterfuge and stealthy, like the other players that are off our off stream table don't typically pick that. So it was nice that Pathfinder game that you picked it, and we had actually had a fairly like I think you guys picked a fairly balanced party, or at least a party that covered certain
Oh
categories.
yeah, because there was an alchemist, wasn't it? And he could heal,
Yeah.
couldn't he?
Hmm.
He could like throw bottles at
You
us or
guys did
something.
like the hybrid class
Yeah.
approach, where there was like a few different, like you had classes that could kind of dabble in multiple
Mhm.
disciplines, and I mean, just to cover any shortcomings and all that stuff. And that's the kind of game thing, because you guys didn't really know, other than I was putting the fabled city of Alkenstar at your fingertips,
Well,
where your adventures would go.
that's because I feel like the rogue has a lot more like. Oh no, I was. The reason I say that is because I just dawned on me is because I played the rogue in your Pathfinder game, and
Mhm.
then when we played the Arabian game, I played the monk that was basically a rogue, if you recall. He was the shadow monk who basically snuck
Mhm.
around and could do all the roguey stuff and wasn't a very good monk.
Yeah, I
Um,
remember that.
I have a lot of characters that are I'm a fighter, but I'm really not very good at
Whereas another one of our
it.
players is just like, how can I make this the best fighter without being a fighter? Like,
Exactly.
yeah, I've always been impressed at the builds that he comes up with. And
I always
everything.
choose. I like I said. I usually get a character concept and I follow it
Mhm.
as closely as possible, and that will cause me to make unoptimal choices, which sometimes isn't good. But yeah, so yeah, but no, what roguelike is like a lot of my characters. But that, and one of the reasons like I like the rogue like is the character that I played in our Pathfinder game. Like I enjoy him because there's a lot he can do outside of combat. Like there was a lot
Yeah.
he could do character wise in the town. Like his plan to build a thieves guild and stuff like that is all stuff like I
Yeah.
guess you could make a fighters guild, but that doesn't sound near as interesting.
No, and I mean the fact that you got to, there was a subterfuge in a game of kind of a coyly playing off the newsies and everything like
Hmm.
that. I mean, all those kind of things were a lot of fun to role play, and that's not necessarily captured in the rules, but
Yeah, whereas like when we did Found Delver, I made the fighter because
mhm,
a um D&D combat isn't usually unfriendly to me, so I just made a character that like I just made the character that had a high AC and a lot of hit points, and
mhm.
goal was just stand in front of things so the monk could explode on them and kill them.
And always find the owlbear. That's Brent's
Oh yeah,
MO.
I'm good at that too. I'm good at finding
Always
the owlbear.
always find the owlbear face first.
Yep.
So yeah, so I think that I'm curious as to how people out there play games. I mean, are you part of the crowd that's, eschews any type of optimal gamist party composition, or do you like having that party composition? Do you like having the traditional high fantasy group that you see on the cover of D&D books and everything like that? Let us know. We'd be curious to know if you have experience, where it went well and where it didn't, like tell us your stories. But I think that's pretty much it for today. We're making nice concise episodes, and we're here if you like us, so hit subscribe if you want to hear more of these types of talks, etc., etc.
Like,
I'm going to be better
subscribe.
at YouTube at some YouTube.
YouTube, YouTube. We're starting our own streaming service called
Yeah.
YouTube.
Yep. If you've made it this far, obviously my brain has leaked out my ears and I don't know how to talk anymore. But yeah, like, subscribe if you want to hear more of these stories. Comment if you want to tell us the types of things that you want to talk about. We're just a bunch of friends that like playing games, and we're really curious about how other people are doing it, so that we can improve our own craft and hobbies. So,
Yeah,
uh,
and like I said, if you enjoy those types of tactical games where you need to optimize your party, I think that's like more power to you. I would like to hear, how much fun that is for you guys because it's something that I've always struggled with. But if you want to get a hold of us and you want to talk to us more about this, you can always leave a comment, like Mike said, or you can reach out to us on any of our socials at Rollwise or email us at rollwiseguys@gmail.com.
yep.
Is there anything else you would like to add before I send us out?
No, I just think if you want to catch us, we're typically Monday nights. We live stream on YouTube through
Catch us on the
Turb.
turb. Catch us on
Catch
the
us on the
turb.
Turb. Yeah. Monday nights, 8:30 Pacific time. We usually play games, but sometimes we just hang out. Right now, we're doing a Cthulhu Confidential one-on-one. So it's going to be a lot of fun, and that is obviously not an optimal party size. So
One guy.
one guy,
It
do
is,
what you want.
but it is optimal for a solo game.
It is. It's optimized for
And if it's
duet
not,
play.
if it's not, there's a problem because that's all the whole
Brett's
game
gonna
is
find
built.
out real quick how the game is optimized against
29
you.
guys attack you. I think I'm in trouble.
Challenge roll.
It's the Ralph Wiggum "I'm in danger" meme all over again. But
Yeah, so
anyways, everybody, thank you for joining us. We appreciate you as always. Be safe out there and always roll well and roll wise.
see ya.